Welcome back to Wednesday on the Pagan Perspective. I'm your Wednesday host, Yeka, and this week we have been talking about craft or magical names. So there's a couple of questions in here, but mainly what are our thoughts on having them in general? Do we have one ourselves? What do we think the purpose is, and has that changed over time? And also that a lot of folks are hearing that they must have one in when they're joining or newcomers to paganism, I suppose. And do we agree? So, first of all, I do not have one. Um, the name Yeka is not a craft name, it's not a magical name, it's just part of a username. When I created my first YouTube account, I guess probably 10 years ago at this point, I had been learning how to harvest and use the fiber from yucca. So I just created the name Made of Yucca. And then the name yucca just sort of stuck. So yucca is this beautiful plant that we have in the desert southwest. It's that spiky, looks like an aloe vera almost, but not so succulent. And you can do all kinds of things with the fiber. You can make rope from it. So that's how the name came about, and then it just sort of stuck. My actual name is Arwen, and that's an old family name. It's an old Welsh name that's been in the family for hundreds of years. And it also had the added benefit of being from the Lord of the Rings, and my parents were huge nerds, so that was a plus. So I grew up with a pretty unusual name to begin with. I think the year I was born, there were like 7 people, including myself, in the United States given that name. And it's a little bit more popular now that the movies came out, but I have yet to meet another human named Arwen. I have met a cat and I have met a donkey, but no humans. So I don't know if my relationship to having another name would be different if I had a more common name. Um, in terms of in terms of are they useful or purpose, I think that they can be very powerful because I think that names are very much um, gateways into identities. Names are identities, and we can have many different identities, and um, those can be very useful in our life and very honest identities, but they're a way into it. And the names that we get called, for instance, I'll use a few in my life. Um, the name of mom or the identity of mom is a very different identity than the name or identity of ma'am that I am given on the street when somebody, you know, wants something or bumps into me. The identity, the name Arwen, or the or my last name, those are different identities, and I think that taking a name um, that has powerful symbology to you um, can be a way of bringing whatever that is into oneself and into the roles that one plays um, in whatever group they're in. So there are some traditions in a modern paganism where taking on a new name, taking a craft name, is part of the process. And I suspect that a lot of it is for that purpose of allowing the person to have that, to using it like a key to those different parts of themselves. Um, Even though, it's not something that I do. And I suppose maybe it's because I was raised as a pagan. I was raised this way. That wasn't a, there's not, I don't have a separate part of me that I step into to be pagan. Um, I don't step into a different part of myself to be in ritual or something like that. For me, it's very important to try and integrate all of that together. But I could see how it could be very useful in certain circumstances. And then the last bit of it is um, that there are newcomers to paganism that are hearing that they must have such a name. And for paganism as this big general thing, I don't think that's the case. There are specific traditions that if one is going to be a member of that specific tradition, that is part of and a requirement for that tradition. But those traditions do not represent the entirety of paganism, and so it really depends on what somebody's practice is. And my guess is that a lot of people who are exploring this and who are going to start in a sort of solitary, independent situation where they're just sort of forging their own path, that in that kind of situation, there are no requirements. It's what works for you and what feels right and what tool is going to be helpful. And once again, having this is a tool. And on this channel, we talk about all kinds of different tools, but not one of them is mandatory. You don't have to do spell work. You don't have to do ritual. You don't have to meditate. You don't have to do divination. You don't have to have something. These are all tools that many people find useful. If they work for you, if it's something you want to explore, great. But there's no, in general, requirement that you must do or use this particular tool. So that's my thoughts this week, and subs next week, and then we will be back with some topics that I'm very much looking forward to in August. Until then, take care.